we're talking about the debt profile of the company. So let us see how the secured and unsecured loans would be computed in the form of debt schedule. So please open file number 6, sorry. Please open file number 6, and now we'll work upon the debt schedule and also the equity schedule. So if you see the sequence in which we are working upon all of these items, we kind of discussed it before. If I take you back to the file number 1, here I had mentioned that we would work on revenue drivers, operating cost drivers, and capex and depreciation. Now is the next part that we're going to be working upon the funding structure, which basically covers the debt and equity profile of the company, right? So I'm going to be having the debt schedule, equity schedule in version number 6. So let us see what we have over here. So as I said in the input tab, you will keep on working on it to include as much information as you can. Like I just want to show you a couple of items related to the financing structure or the funding structure. You see here, you've got the interest rate as 10% on secured loan, 10% on unsecured loan, and some interest rate on the cash balance, interest rate on the overdraft. Repayment of loan is also given here in row number 56, 57, etc. And then you have the debt schedule, you would do follow the same structure for secured loan and also for any other category of loan that the company has taken. So usually you would see that we tend to create one schedule for one category
Amardeep,
of the
sorry to
loan.
interrupt, but we missed out the last few minutes of what you spoke.
Okay. Uh, just one second. Let me see. I see another note that my screen is frozen. I'm in the sheet debt schedule. I don't know if the screen is visible. I'm in the debt schedule sheet.
Right now it's visible, but in between it was not visible and we couldn't hear you.
Okay, fine, fair enough. So let me start the discussion afresh. So I will start this file afresh. So just in case you missed it, you can go through it again. So what I was talking about, that is the next step after creating the asset schedule. What we need to do, we need to work on the funding structure. The funding basically comes in the form of debt and equity. So in this file, we are going to be talking about how we can create a debt schedule and how we can create an equity schedule. So if I take you to the balance sheet of this company, you would notice that this company has not raised any secured loan in the last 3 years. Still, I am going to create a schedule for the secured loan as well, so that there is a placeholder available in the financial model, and anybody who would like to take an assumption of raising a fresh loan in future, that should be easily available in our financial model. So what that person would need to do, that person would simply go to the assumptions tab, make changes over here in terms of amount to be raised, what is the corresponding interest rate, and so on, so forth, and accordingly it will flow in the financial model. Because the essence of creating a model is to provide a flexibility to the end user to play with those assumptions, make changes to the inputs, and then see the impact on the final output. So that's essentially what we're going to do in this file. So let's go to the debt schedule and create the schedule for unsecured loan. Practically, if you notice that a company may have raised loans from 5 different parties at different points in time, so for each and every loan that the company has raised, there would be a different schedule which would be created. Because each of these loans could attract a different interest rate, these loans could have a different repayment structure, and these loans may have a different mechanism in terms of frequency of payment as well, right? So we would have different schedule for different categories of loan that the company has taken over there. So let's work upon unsecured loan. What I want to do over here is, to begin with, I want to have, excuse me, I want to have an opening balance, which is going to be essentially the closing balance of the previous year. So I'll put a formula here, which is opening balance as equal to closing balance of previous year, right? If you want, you can do that logic over here as well. It is equal to closing balance of previous year. Like I said in the previous sheet when I was talking about the asset schedule, I said that any balance sheet item, when you create a schedule for it, it will always have 4 lines. You would have opening balance, you would have additions, you would have reductions, and finally the closing balance. So opening is always going to be equal to the closing of the previous year. So I'm going to make it equal to the closing of the previous year, and that's how it's going to work in this sheet. Then comes the next part, that what is going to increase it. Any fresh loan that you take is gonna increase that balance. So what I will do, I'll go to the assumptions tab and look at this number. So we have the debt issuance in the row number 61. So in the assumptions tab, you see in 2016, 17 and 18, whatever is the new debt issuance which has happened, it is reflected here. So if I just highlight that in a separate color, you would get to see that there is a $200 million loan that we are taking in 18, but there isn't anything which is reflected in 16. Now this is wrong, because if you go back to the balance sheet, let us try to analyze it from here. In 2016, we have an unsecured loan balance of $200 million. And the company was started 3 years back in 2016 itself, which means that this loan was raised in that particular year. So we have to come back to the assumption step and put that $200 million over here as well. So please put $200 million in the first year, because that's the new debt issuance which has happened in the first year, right? And this new debt issuance which we are taking in the assumption tab will now be taken in the debt schedule. So I'll go back to the debt schedule and flow this number over there. So first in the input tab, assumption tab, you would put the relevant inputs from the historical data. If anything is missing, you would put that first afresh, and then you would go back to the schedule here and say that the new debt issuance is equal to this divided by 10 raised to the power 6, because you kind of take it in $1 million out here. So it's going to be adjustment. It's going to be adjusted like this, and then comes the amount that you are repaying. That also is available in the assumption tab. So what we are doing here, we are plus repayment. So take a minute, complete it till this stage, and then we'll move on to the repayment part. So now the repayment is going to be equal to this divided by 10 raised to the power 6, which is 0 in the first year, but that's okay. So our closing will become opening plus additions minus repayments. That gives you the closing balance, which when you drag on the right hand side is going to give you the right result, right? So if you drag it on the right hand side, it will give you the right result. Like if I interpret this now, the next year I'm going to start with 200. There is no new debt that I will raise, so it will remain the same. but there is a repayment of $10 million. So the closing balance is going to look like 190. And the next year, when I take 190 as an opening balance, take a fresh loan of 200 and repay $10 million, I am left with a net number of 380. This is how it works. So what you need to do, first of all, you need to validate if the inputs in the assumption tab are actually in line with what we saw in the historical data, because we saw that in 2016 we raised a loan of 200, but it was missing in the assumptions tab. So you could take that $200 million number in the assumptions tab in the cell E61. So Abhijit, in E61, I have manually entered this $200 million out here, which was missing. Because this is what I'm trying to explain, that when you look at the balance sheet, it shows that there is a loan which we have taken, but it was missing in the assumptions tab. So we are adding that as an input in the year 2016. All right. So please include that input out here. So Saurabh, to your point, yes, the interest rate would be a weighted average, but there are two ways to handle it. In case you're creating a different schedule for different categories of loan, then it's basically the interest rate applicable on that loan. Balance sheet of a company and the P&L of a company from the annual report, and let us assume that you don't get a split of the loans. So what you could do in that case, you could just take the total loan which is visible in the balance sheet, and you could compare that to the interest expense being shown in the P&L. That will kind of give you a weighted average of interest rate. All right. So take your time and create this. Anuj, I hope the voice is now clear. I think there's a terrible network right now, which is leading to this glitch. But just keep on letting me know in case you face any issues in between. I would repeat that part for you. But what I've discussed right now is that in case there are different categories of debt, you would have different types of schedules created for all of it. And in case the details of the individual categories of the loan are not available, you could create a common schedule and work out a common or an average weighted average interest rate, which would be used for interest computation. So this is what we have right now. In the row number 8, we have got the closing balance of the loan, which essentially needs to flow to balance sheet. So this item that you see, closing balance, this is relevant for the balance sheet. Okay. Okay, I see the voice is still breaking. I don't know what is the issue. Let me just check the internet connection. It seems that the connection is fine at my end. Still it's showing something. Okay, so Prachi, it's okay now. Fair enough. Thank you. Thanks for confirming. Now, what we need to do next is we have got the balance sheet item here in the row number 8. But the problem is if you look at the year number 2018, so for the understanding sake, let us focus on 2018 year number. Now we started off this year with 190. We are taking a fresh loan of 200 at the same rate of interest of 10%. So we are taking a top up. And then we are also repaying $10 million on the existing loan that we have. We are closing the year with 380. So what is the component on which I should be computing the interest cost? Because I can either compute it on 190 or I can compute it on 380. But if I go for any of these two values, then it's going to be wrong. Because if I use 190, then I am indirectly assuming that this 200 would have been raised at the end of the year. I did not use it, so I don't have to pay interest on this component. Or on the other side, if I compute interest on 380, which is my closing balance, then that is an indication that I used 200 for the entire year, which means that I would have raised this $200 million additional amount right on the day one, which again sounds to be a little extreme assumption. So let us take an assumption that it might have been raised somewhere during the year. So the best way to handle that is, why don't we compute the average loan outstanding and use that as a basis to compute the interest expense. Because it's a balance sheet item, so it actually makes sense that we take the average of opening and closing and then work out the interest expense. So I'm going to take the average of opening and closing loan to be able to see what is the average loan outstanding, and that becomes relevant for us for the purpose of computing interest expense. Right? So let's take an average of opening loan and the closing loan and see what is the average loan outstanding across the year in row number 10. Yeah, Pratmesh, I'm just waiting for everybody to complete, so I was not speaking. In between, if you've got any questions, please let me know. What about 2016? See, 16, in fact, I don't even need for 17 and 18. I don't need it for 17 and 18 also, because essentially we are creating the projection starting from 2019 onwards. So I've just included it for 17, 18 because we we can compute an average starting from this year only, because before that we don't have an average to begin with. There's nothing in the opening balance, so probably it wouldn't show the right result. So that's why I'm starting the average from 2017 onwards. But as I said, you don't even need 17 and 18 over here. You can ignore these 2 years also, because this schedule is important for us to work out the interest expense from 2019 onwards. So we're going to take the interest rate from the assumptions tab. As to what it is 10%. From row number 50, we can take the interest expense. That's the interest expense, which you could use for 2019 onwards to simply multiply and get the interest expense. So you could take the formula out here as equal to the 370 multiplied by 37%. So that's the formula that I'm putting over here. So in this column, I'm showing all the formula that I'm using on the left hand side or on the right hand side. So whatever values you see over here on the right hand side, the formulas corresponding to that are included on the left side. So what I did, first of all, I computed the average loan outstanding. Then I picked the interest rate from the assumptions tab, multiply these two to be able to work out what is the annual interest expense expected in that particular year. And this interest expense is actually a P&L item. This interest expense is going to flow to our P&L and complete the financial model towards the P&L from the P&L perspective. All right. So take a minute, work it out, and the way we have created a schedule for unsecured loan, the same logic we would use for secured loan as well. Right now, you see that secured loan is totally zero. There is nothing right now which is there in the financial model. But obviously, as you move ahead, as I said before, if somebody would like to include an input that we would be raising some sort of unsecured loan in future, the person needs to go to the assumptions tab, make changes out there, and automatically it will flow here to be able to give us the right result. So at the bottom, you could just include a summary, which is the sum of interest expense on the unsecured loan and the secured. You take that in all of the years, you take the summation from row number 12 and row number 22. So take the sum of these two and it gives you the total interest expense. And this total interest expense is the item for P&L. This is going to flow to P&L. And what flows to balance sheet is basically this. This is going to flow to balance sheet. And this item that you see here, this also is going to flow to balance sheet. The closing balance of the loan flows to balance sheet and the interest expense flows to P&L. So as the next step, once you are done, please move the closing balance of loan from row number 8 and row number 18 to the balance sheet and then take row number 24 to P&L. So move these three items to the respective output statements. So let us first complete the balance sheet part, plug the closing balance numbers out there, and then go to the interest expense part, which is in the P&L. So I'll take a pause here for you to ask any questions that you have till this stage, and then we'll move on to the balance sheet to plug these numbers. Any questions, please let me know over the chat window. I hope you are done till this stage. For any questions, please let me know over the chat.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir, this Excel files, I have gone through it, this first session.
Mhm.
That Excel files, 15, more than 25 to 30 commands were there. Formulas and Excel works are there. Is it enough for that financial modeling?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question? I couldn't
That,
understand.
yeah, that's sir. What, sir? Actually, this first session, Excel operations was there, no?
Mhm.
Excel session.
Okay, you're talking about the Excel refresher topic that we discussed in
Yes,
day
yes.
one.
That is enough. Is that is enough for financial modeling?
See, that should be sufficient for financial modeling. The thing is, let us look at it from this perspective. Excel is such a vast topic
Hmm.
that we could never, learn Excel in just about 2 classes or 3 classes. But the extent to which we need the Excel formula to be used in the financial model, we tried and covered all those concepts in those 2 classes.
So
But
we
as
also
we move
mentioned.
ahead, definitely we're going to be covering a few more concepts of Excel as required. So there would be a session on the project finance modeling, wherein I would introduce some more functions of Excel. Then there would be a dashboard class wherein we would discuss how to visualize the data by using Excel tools and functionalities. All of that will keep on happening. But yeah, to summarize, the extent to which we discuss the formulae in the Excel refresher class, that should be sufficient for us to create a financial model. But I wouldn't make a statement stating that it is the only so the list of
Yeah, that I
functions
can
that we
understand,
discussed
sir.
in 15, that's going to
Yeah,
be
you will,
exhaustive.
will
But
be
broadly
covering
it should cover.
also. Yeah, you will be covering also data visualization section in
Yes,
Excel for
yes,
further. Okay.
correct.
But exactly, can you brief it up? Exactly, we will just it's really based on the assumptions only. We are making the financial model
Hmm.
with the prior past statements. Past
True.
statements and assumption, we are making the projecting the financials.
Correct, that's right. And in fact, that's what the financial model is all about. Because when we talk about financial model, we're talking about the future financial projection, right? And the future needs to be based on certain assumptions. Like if I'm running this business, I have to take this particular some assumptions which I listed out in the assumptions tab, and then accordingly work out how my future is going to look like. So it is all about assumptions, and then translating those assumptions in the form of financial statement. Because what we are trying to do over here, to create a integrated model, so that should there be any change in any of the assumptions that we have taken as of now, and these assumptions, were supposedly to change, then it will automatically have an impact on the subsequent sheets, and all my corresponding output statements would be reflected. So that's how it is basically going to be created and used.
Sir,
Let us say.
yeah, can you cover time series analysis also, if possible? Time series.
Okay, I'll do that. Let me see if time permits in any of the sessions. I'll cover the additional components of the ask.
Or you have any notes for it, or any topic you can send it, you can share it with us.
We can do that.
Time series.
I'm sure there must be something which is available in the database. We can share those additional details with you.
Okay.
So you've already got the material for the 8 classes that we have as part of this course. Apart from those 8 sessions, if there is anything else that you feel is important which you would like to
Any
understand,
analysis in the financial
please
because
feel-
viewpoints
yes.
or
Yeah.
where analysis? That's what. Where
Yeah. So
analysis, do analysis. It's like that 3-4 topics if possible. So it will be useful.
okay, let me now come to this point. So what I was saying that we have got the material for 8 classes. Please go through that once. In case you feel there is any additional data, any additional topic that for which you need further clarity or further information, please feel free to write back to us stating the list of topics that you would like, and we should be able to provide you the corresponding material. And if time permits in any of the classes, we can also pick.
Yeah. No problem.
Right.
Thank you.
Let me read a couple of more questions. So, Venikit, your point is around the financial planning and analysis. Yes, we are doing actually what we are doing. We are creating a financial model which is more like financial projections. And typically, in any company, if you talk about the FP&A, that's like a financial planning and analysis team. They work on budgets, they work on forecast, they work on precisely the same set of model that we are working upon. Right? It's more like that. Now let's move. So yeah, Richie, so I'm just going to the P&L and the balance sheet. So just give me a minute. So now let's move to the balance sheet and pull the secured and unsecured loans balance here. So the secured loan closing balance will come from row number 18, which is 0, because we haven't taken any inputs for this. And for unsecured loan, we've got the data in the row number 8. We're going to pull it from there, which you drag on the right hand side, and then you finally take the summation, right? So this is how you can work out the total non-current liabilities. So the closing balance of the loan we have taken to the balance sheet out here in row number 15 and row number 16. The closing balance of secured loan will come from row number 18 of the debt schedule, and the closing balance of the unsecured loan will come from row number 8 of the debt schedule. And then you take the sum to get the total outstanding loan. And if I go to the P&L, you would pull the interest expense, the total interest expense number which is there, that will flow to your P&L. Right? So take a minute to complete this balance sheet component, and then I'll show you the P&L as to how we can move it. Right? So you would see that by now we have covered a lot of stuff in the balance sheet. So we have covered the current liabilities, we have covered the non-current liabilities, and shareholders equity we'll be covering very shortly. In the next 10 minutes, we'll be completing the shareholder equity as well. And on the asset side, if you see, we have covered both current assets and non-current assets. So now after completing the shareholder equity part in this balance sheet, you see that we have got the entire balance sheet ready, except the cash figure, because cash, as I said before as well, is usually the last item to be filled in the financial model. So we would need to create the cash flow statement, which would give us the cash flow and also tell us the closing cash balance. That becomes a data point to be used in our balance sheet. And at that point in time, you would notice that the balance sheet would tally. Okay, so let's move to the P&L now and complete the P&L. Over here, we have got the interest expense line. So I'm going to take the interest expense here from the debt schedule. So make it equal to, you go to the debt schedule and pull it from row number 24. That gives you debt. That gives you interest expense on debt that we have taken. So from row number 24, wherein we computed the total interest expense and debt schedule, we would flow that and pull it over here. All right. And now you can see that we've got the profit before tax, which is actually negative. So if the company is going to work like this, as we saw before, that EBITDA is also on a declining spree. So if the company is going to work like this, obviously it's not going to be a sustainable business. It's going to incur losses. So it must do something either to manage the cost or to increase its revenue. It must do one of these two things to be able to increase its profitability, and hence that's how you'll be able to get back to the positive profits that we were having the last couple of years. But right now, with the level of assumption that we have got, we see that it is negative. So what I want to do essentially at this stage is I want to use the PBT and work out the income tax on the basis of it. So the income tax would be computed on the PBT value, which is profit before tax. And you see that in a couple of years, we have the negative figures in the PBT. So please make sure that you do not include the tax expense in the years when there is negative profit. Because when there are losses, obviously the company does not pay tax usually, unless and until there are some other provisions of the income tax which are applicable for this company, which requires it to pay a tax even in case of losses. Because sometimes what happens is there is a concept of minimum alternate tax which could be applied. So if that gets kicked off, then the company would still need to pay taxes. But usually what happens is that we would not have further details about, when we are creating the financial model, we don't have too much details about the taxable income. So we tend to use PBT as a proxy for computing the tax. So the logic that I'm going to show over here is, or I'm going to put over here is that if PBT is positive, then tax expense is equal to PBT multiplied by tax rate. Else, I'm going to take tax expense equal to 0. So this is the logic that I'm going to use over here for the purpose of computing the tax expense. In case it is positive, like a simple if function to say that is it positive? Yes. Then take this figure, multiply this with the tax rate, which is available in the assumptions tab, like it's 30% for 2019 given here. Otherwise, I'm going to make it 0 like this. So it becomes a figure like this, which is only visible in the first year when I have a profit. Otherwise, in all other years, it is blank. So let me show you the formula here to be able to use it in our financial model. So take a minute, work it out, and complete the P&L till this stage. And now we see that we've got all the items of the P&L completed. Okay, so I will take a pause here for the next 2 to 3 minutes for you to take out your own time, complete the P&L, and then only we'll move forward to the last sheet of the day, which is to compute the shareholders' equity. Right? So please work on the P&L and let me know in case you have any questions over the chat window. For any questions, please let me know. If you're working on it, that's fine. Arun, I see you have a question related to the deferred tax assets and liabilities. See, basically what happens is, in the real life situation, if I have to put it this way, if you are talking about a company which is operating in a relevant, in any country, let's say you talk about India, then we must be fully aware of the applicable tax laws as to how we compute the taxable income, and that's how we're going to use that taxable income for the purpose of computing income tax. But then eventually what that means is we need to have the transactional level data. If I am working in this company, then definitely I would be able to do justice to the computation of taxable income. However, as an external analyst, if you and I have to work on this kind of a financial model without getting too much of information from the company's management, then probably creating a schedule for the income tax workings could be a little difficult task for us. So what people tend to do, financial modelers usually look at the historical data and the trends to be able to work out a broad computation for the income tax computation, right? But as you rightly mentioned, if I'm working in this company, if you are working in this company and you've got details of the transactional level data, which could include your unallowable expenses or include some other items which gives you some additional deduction in a couple of years because of certain other factors as enshrined in the law of tax, then you would need to make all of those adjustments and work out the income tax accordingly. Similarly, the MAT reversal going forward, or maybe something like that, would also be equally relevant, because over there you would need to find out the book profits as to what your book profits are. Are they really going to attract the minimum alternate tax that is supposed to be paid? And then you'd apply a min of the two numbers to be able to see the tax figure there. But from a DCF standpoint, when you do the valuation over there, it honestly would not have a major impact. I'm not saying it will not have any impact at all, but yes, there wouldn't be a major impact, because the deferred tax asset or a deferred tax liability is actually on account of the timing gap, right? So because of the timing gap only, we get to create a deferred tax asset or a deferred tax liability. And when it comes to the DCF, we are talking about future and we are going to discount it off. So it's not going to make a major gap, because at any point in time that the deferred tax asset which might have been created would be over, or the deferred tax liability which is created, that would also be over, right? Or it gets into a cycle, so that in terms of delta there isn't too much impact. So in the DCF, in the longer run, you would find out when we look at the future cash flows, it's not going to have a major impact on the final valuation value. So you would see many a times that people who create the financial model and they see that the historical DTA or DTL is given, they tend to take it constant, because we don't have a basis to project it properly. So that is usually taken as constant. And in the P&L, if they have to work out the tax without having access to the transactional data, they will look at the historical effective tax rate as to what is the book profit and what is the tax being paid, and use that as a basis to compute the tax figure for future as well. So that's what is typically done as a proxy by most of the financial modelers to be able to compute the tax and the deferred tax asset and liability in the balance sheet. All right. Okay, so Amanpreet, you have a question which is actually pretty valid for a startup. Now, for a startup, we usually do not have any historical data, or at max that startup might have been in existence for just 6 months, 1 year, or maybe 2 years. So the projections in those cases are actually very volatile. So you would see that for a startup company, everything is in the air. It's more like a business plan which the promoter is looking to execute. But whether that will be executed or not, nobody is aware of it. So that is why what happens is when when any kind of funding is required in a startup, the person is going to put in money, let's say a venture capitalist or an angel investor or any private equity firm which is going to put in any money in the company at the initial stage, they will basically discount for this particular option. Because what happens is, what is the logic behind putting a money in startup company? It is quite likely that the startup may eventually fail. So the promoter or the founder may be showing very good picture of the company 5 years down the line, but in reality, maybe after 2 years or 3 years, the company may close down. So what venture capitalists tend to do, or any other angel investor tends to do, they basically invest in multiple startups, because their intention is that if they are putting money in one startup, then at least out of those 5 startups, 1 startup or 2 startups would actually be profitable. And if other 2 or 3 are going to close down, the profit from the remaining 2 will offset that loss which they would incur in other investments. So that's the strategy in their mind. That's why what they do in the startup, they basically tend to take a huge amount of capital, a huge amount of risk premium, which I'm going to talk about in the class tomorrow. When we do the valuation, they increase the cost of capital. So if it is, let's say 20%, normally they will take 30%, because what they are doing, they're taking an additional risk and they would increase that cost of capital. or sometimes they make an adjustment for probability of survival. So whatever cash flows we compute, we kind of reduce it by 50%, 60%. And that's how they kind of adjust the valuation. So the catch here is there is no best method to create a financial model for a startup, because over there everything is in the air. Nothing has been started, or even if it is in the process of being executed, it has not actually seen the light. So over there, this financial model will at least provide them a structure where they can keep on putting all of those inputs. So the people may tend to create some sort of a scenarios that most likely it is expected that revenue will go up by 40%. But pessimistic case, revenue may go up by only 20%. Best case, the revenue may go up by 100%, because in startups, these percentages also tend to be on the higher side because the base is pretty small. So in the initial years, you would see that these kind of scenarios are built in the financial model for the startup, and that's how they use it. Okay. So great. Meher, I see you have a question that you are facing some issues in understanding some of the logical part. So maybe what you could do, if you need to read through a bit on the financial analysis, so you may have to brush up your skills a bit more on the financial accounting concept, so that should help you correlate the items between the various financial statements. Because see, the thing is, if you have to create a financial model, you need to have good amount of understanding about the line items of P&L, balance sheet and cash flow, as to how each and every item of the P&L flows to balance sheet and cash flow. Though I'm trying my best to explain that linkage, you might still want to read some additional literature to acquaint yourself with the ground level stuff of this. So that should basically help you, get better understanding of this. So yeah, Abhinav, I see that we could definitely use do the industry analysis, and that's not just for startup, but even for a well-established company. We need to look at the industry and how the market is behaving, and that's how we take the assumptions.